All right. Well, good afternoon, everyone. Hello to Savannah. Hello to Georgia. Hello to the United States. We are back another Saturday here on the Watchdogs and all things relevant media production. And so today, you see, we're missing someone. Julius Hall is out advocating for the folks of Chatham County, and so we will bring him back hopefully next week. But today we have a great co-host and a great guest. And I'll shut my mouth so both Sabrina and B can tell you a little bit about themselves.
Well, hello, coastal Georgia, and then some. I know that we go all across the nation, so congratulations to ATR. I am Sabrina Newby. I am the first Congressional District Director for the Federation of Democratic Women, and I'm also the CEO for the Coastal Georgia Minority Chamber. And I am so excited to be here with today's guest. I hope to be asking a lot of questions and learning just as much as you guys do. So that's me in a nutshell.
All right. And so we have Kenneth running for Secretary of State. As many of you know, on the Watchdogs, we do a lot of conversations around getting to know pieces around what matters to us, and the Secretary of State matters to us. And so, if you could tell us about kind of your journey to this seat and about yourself.
Yeah, thank you so much. And I'm so happy to be on here with y'all today. And, would love to share with you a little bit more about myself and looking forward to having some conversation with the both of you. So I came into public service unexpectedly. I was one of those kids who did not have this life plan of running for office, specifically because my parents never really talked about it and because I never saw anybody who looked like me run for office before. I am the daughter of refugees from Vietnam, and my parents actually fled civil conflict. And during the time in which they were in Vietnam, my dad was held as a prisoner of war in what they called re-education camp for 3 years. And during that time, he was subjected to hard labor and starvation. And we actually don't know what else because he doesn't really talk about it. So when he was released from prison camp, my parents made the decision to flee their country, and they left in the middle of the night on a small boat and ended up stranded in the middle of the ocean until a Thai fisherman found them and saved their lives and brought them to refugee camp. And I would say, from the time in which they were resettled in America, I mean, you can't really talk about refugee resettlement without talking about the political context of it. Our president was actually Jimmy Carter, and Jimmy Carter made this very unpopular decision. And he said, I'm going to increase the number of refugees we take into our country. And there was a Republican governor in Iowa, Robert Ray, and he wrote Jimmy Carter a letter. And he said, Dear President Carter, if you open up our country to Vietnamese refugees, I will double the number that we take in the state of Iowa. So my entire family ended up being resettled in Iowa, where I was born in 1981. We ended up moving to the South when I was about 7 in Augusta, Georgia, where my parents actually still live. So I was raised in Augusta, going through the public school system there and having this really typical immigrant household experience. It was, you better make good grades, you better stay out of trouble, keep your head down. And they never ever talked about things like community building and power building and political power, or using my sacred, most fundamental right to vote at the ballot box to demand those changes, because they fled from a country that took away their civil liberties. By the time they left, there was no freedom of press, freedom of speech, the right to assemble, and the loss of the right to free and fair elections. So they were scared of government and couldn't envision that their daughters could have a life here where we could be part of government and part of community building. And so it was that for that reason that I started a nonprofit working in public schools. And I did that for 10 years in DeKalb in Atlanta. And every week I'm in the classroom with students, Black and brown kids who have been left behind because our General Assembly won't fund our public education system. They want to expand Medicaid, invest in public transit, invest in affordable housing, all of these things that were impacting my kids' ability to invest in themselves and be economically successful. And in doing that work, I really came to realize the importance of representation at our state capitol. So I ran in 2017 when Stacey Abrams decided to run for governor and left vacant a House seat in Georgia. And during my time at the General Assembly, I saw very much of the same thing. Having people at the table who did not either understand or care to understand how the policies that they were advocating for or passing impacted real life Georgians. And obviously part of that was this fight around the fundamental right to vote. And we saw all of that compound last year when Georgia finally delivered for Biden. And then we saw this concerted efforts for Republicans to undermine our results, our election system, and doubling down on the big lie. And I've been in the center of that storm, both as a lawmaker, but also as an organizer, and seeing exactly what it looks like. When I went to my neighbor's house, who's 70 years old, and he had to cure his absentee ballot and had no email address, no internet, and no smartphone. So he had to rely on me, a total stranger during a pandemic, to come into his house, use my cell phone to take a picture of his driver's license, and trust that I was going to email it to DeKalb registrar office in order for his vote to count. And that's just one among many stories, as y'all know, how all of this is manifesting itself in Georgia and impacting voters. But now is also this attempt to overturn the results of the election, the denial of peaceful transfer of power, and how it's a coordinated national effort that's targeting states like Georgia, Michigan, Wisconsin, Arizona, so they can set us up for 2024. Mm-hmm. That's what's at stake here for us.
How did you feel at what moment did you know that you wanted to run for Secretary of State? Was it during the big lie? Was it before the big lie? At what moment?
I think it was a journey, right? It was when I got elected. The Speaker of the House, who is Republican, determines which cities or which committees he assigns us to. And as a Democrat, you never get the committees that you request. And so, I request my committees, and he ends up assigning me to governmental affairs. And I thought, okay, fine. I don't really know exactly what this committee does, but it's the committee that oversees election laws. So every single year, there was an attempt to make it harder to vote. The attempt to eliminate Sunday voting, rolling back our city of Atlanta municipal voting hours from 8 p.m. to 7 p.m., and also the big debate on our election machines and House Bill 316. I mean, I was at the table for all of those things. And then last year, what I saw very early on was this really coordinated effort on the Republican side to sow seeds of doubt as it pertains to the security of absentee ballot voting. They did this before the results of the primary and before the results of the general election, because they knew that we were going to use vote by mail in larger numbers than they were for the first time in Georgia's history. When they passed no excuse absentee ballot voting, it was under Republican control, and they passed it without an ID requirement, and they did it to increase turnout for rural voters. And they also used it at higher numbers every single year, and never once did they question the security of absentee ballots until they knew we would use them because we were in a pandemic. And so very early on in committee meetings, they were coordinating all these messaging points. And while we were debating and discussing, there was never any willingness for them to consider adopting legislative change that would improve our process. So one example is we talked about signature match a lot. And we know in the state of Georgia that people of color in Gwinnett County, their signatures were disproportionately rejected. And other states have mechanisms where they save somebody's signature on every government document over a time period because people's handwriting changes, right? And they want to be able to use many examples to match. And we talked about, what if we did that? Uninterested in doing that. They were uninterested in actually thinking about how we improve our election system without disenfranchising voters, because they only wanted to disenfranchise voters, but they also wanted to set us up for 2020, where they would come in and overturn the results of the election. And so it never occurred to me during any of those times. It was just putting my head down, doing the work, and making sure I was going to do everything I could to discredit them, to offer other solutions, to push back against their rhetoric. And it was really shortly after when Giuliani and Trump's legal team came into our legislature, and I did all the work to discredit Trump's expert witness in real time. And my address was released on a right-wing gun site, and I started getting these threats, and people were calling for my execution. And then, as y'all know, when people feel threatened, they automatically go to race and gender to disparage. Yeah. So it was like the usual harassment of that. But then on top of that, it was, she's a traitor and traitors deserve to be executed. And suddenly I'm making this safety plan. And I thought, how in the world are we in this space? So that was the first I thought about it. But then I thought, I'm putting my head down, I'm going into session, and I'm going to do my work. And the whole entire time it was battling against Senate Bill 202 and seeing, again, how nefarious and coordinated, and also how it's being funded by millions of dollars. And also having these conversations across the aisle where Republicans would say to me behind the scenes, we don't believe the election was stolen, but our constituents are mad. And then just recognizing the urgency and the gravity of the moment. When we got out of session, I thought, what is it that I am going to do next to continue this fight for our democracy and voting rights?
Right. One of the things that I remember when all of this was happening, and there was so much confusion around this election period, and they were just throwing my names into the fray so that the Republican, crazies could just kind of like get in there and say, oh my God, go after this person, go after this person. Yeah. I was really shocked at how the president of the United States had set a tone to impart harm on our elected officials and on our democratic process. I was just truly shocked and blown away.
And even his own vice president, even more strict.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then also in the aftermath, people like Pence still being a Republican. Like they literally went into the Capitol to look for him.
Yeah. And they're okay. So question, where were you? Tell me about where you were on the day of the insurrection and what you were thinking at that moment.
So on January 5th, I was the statewide poll watcher for DeKalb County. Mm-hmm. So on the morning of the 5th, I was at a DeKalb County poll before it even opened. And I continued to travel out throughout the county that day to just make sure things were going well. And I remember actually, I was in this parking lot for 3 hours in DeKalb County. It was an early voting location that was not open on election day. And all these voters showed up. And I would say, hey, I'm a Democratic poll monitor. This is an early voting location, but not open on election day. But let me show you where you're going to go vote. I just need to get your last name and whatever. And I would look up their voting location. And I remember two specific incidences. One was a lady pulled up in a van and she was really, really angry. And before she even got out of the car, she was yelling and I couldn't even understand what she was saying, but she was basically my vote didn't count. And why didn't my vote count? And I said, well, when did you vote? And she said, I voted here. And I said, what day did you vote? She said, whatever day she voted. And I said, well, let me show you how you can actually track your vote. And so I look her up and I said, see this here? It says you early voted at this location on this day and your vote has been counted. And she said, oh, okay. And then and she calmed down and she said, oh, okay, thank you. And then before she left, she said, I'm only doing this for my president, and had I think she had a MAGA something in her car or whatever. And I thought, man, they are doing such a disservice to their own voters. I'm I am going to help anyone who shows up here. And I was very nice and calm to everybody. But I thought they are doing such a disservice to their own voters. And then another incident where two women drove up and I said, you can't vote here. It's an early voting location, not open on election day. And they were also very angry. And they were like, we don't even want to vote. We are only here to vote because our president, not because of these two candidates. And I thought again, they are doing such a disservice to their voters. And also on our side of the aisle, there are so many celebrations of people being able to cast their ballot and people who are voting for the first time, and I'm having conversations with people on like why they were voting and what they were doing there. And then there was another man who showed up, and he had a cab drop him off. And I said, I'm sorry, this is not your voting location. And I looked his up, and it's a couple miles away. And I thought, this is just so wrong. This man just had to pay for transportation to get to a voting location that's not even open. And I said, well, why don't I just give you a ride to your polling precinct? So I gave him a ride, and we chatted along the way. And so throughout the day, I'm having all these voter experiences and just watching what's going on the ground in DeKalb. And the last few precincts that I stopped by were mine, and it was right around closing time. And I saw that turnout for these districts were actually outperforming 2020. So I was very excited. I was like, this is a really, really good sign for us. We are outperforming our turnout in these districts in DeKalb that are heavily Democratic. And I felt really good about it. So I went home when the last polling location closed. And I was in a good mood because I was like, I think we're going to do this. I think we're going to do this. And I thought, well, we're probably not going to know the results for a while because it took so long in November. And my boyfriend, who is a sitting state rep, was down at Fulton County watching the vote count because we know Fulton County has been at the center of the storm. And he gets home a few hours later, and he is in distress because there are right-wingers down there creating chaos and trying to threaten election workers who are counting. And then there was an incident when they were trying to bring a drop box back, and they literally tried to block the people from bringing, like in their car, block them from bringing in your drop box. So he was in distress, and he was like, our moods were totally different because our experiences were different. I said, I think we're going to win this. So the next morning, he gets up really early and immediately goes down to Fulton because of the chaos. And he's down there trying to resolve all this stuff, and they're making sure there are attorneys down there because of all this stuff that the right side was trying to do to intimidate people who were just trying to count ballots. And then I saw that we won, and I was super, super, super excited. Yeah. And then a couple hours later, this insurrection happens.
Yeah.
And I thought, I was horrified, but I was also like, wow, we couldn't even have an entire day to celebrate this victory that we worked so hard to deliver. Yeah. This happens. And then there were, I think subsequently, there was like a plan to attack our state capitals. Mm-hmm. And so then we're seeing the increase of security and the day that they're supposed to be there. And I don't remember exactly which day this was. It was right around the 6th or before or after the 6th. I can't remember. But I came home, and there was a Capitol police car just hanging out on my sidewalk. And they had been doing drive-bys and a threat assessment and stuff, but never had one been parked on the sidewalk, just hanging out. And it was raining. It was a miserable day. And I was like, well, this is alarming. This does not make me feel safe at all. Right. And so I went up to him, and I was like, hello, sir. I was like, did something happen? Like something new? And what I was trying to get at is, why are you parked up on my sidewalk? And you have never been parked up on my sidewalk. Did something new happen? Why didn't anyone tell me? Right.
Right. So, right. That's the way of cell phones.
I know. And so he was like, oh yeah, we just did an assessment and looked at the folks that we're kind of monitoring, and we decided we still need to monitor you. And I was like, well, oh my gosh, that does not make me feel comfortable or safe at all. So who knows what the heck was going on? But
wow.
Yeah, it was, I think it definitely was a shock to everyone. Yeah. I remember laying in my bed, and I was looking at television, and I raise up, and I'm like, oh my God, and but one of the things I think it also did, it made people more aware that their vote truly counted. There are so many people that put out the language that, don't vote for whatever reason, but this actually cemented the idea that my vote has some weight to it. So that's what activated a lot of people to want to educate even more so, get out that vote. So there's so many questions I don't want to even monopolize all the time.
No, you're fine. You're fine. I just want to say something that
on January.
Yeah, well, I was here with my mom and dad. And the thing is, my mother and father, I came along late, but they grew up during segregation. And so for my dad, it was just unreal. It was just unreal for someone who supposedly calls himself a leader to sit there and be that immature about a loss. And as I tell people this all the time about that individual, is that when you grow up and nobody ever tells you no, and you're always given things even when you fail, it's hard for people to believe this, but that individual is living in a different context, which is not reality. So now all of a sudden you're getting embarrassed in front of people, a lot of people, and you got to find a way to make it on something that you didn't do. It was on somebody else, and that's just a sad way of living. It's a very cynical way of living. You know what I'm saying? But it was unfortunate. I mean, I can remember just sitting there watching people break the glass. I mean, it's one thing to not like something, right? I mean, for God's sakes, we see black males getting killed every day in the streets by the police. But that doesn't mean as black folk, we're going to go knock down the police barracks. And I mean, there's a limit to decorum. And I think that just really showed that I don't know, it just so many thoughts went through my head. But there's a sense of decorum and respect for the office and respect for people's lives, for God's sakes. These are people's grandmothers, moms, husbands, wives, and you're trying to kill them because you're mad because your person didn't win. Like, think about how childish that is. But people don't think that way. But but Sabrina, ask your questions. I do want to talk a little bit about and be if you could share a little bit more about what that office does. I know a lot of people, and I tell people this all the time: vote for every election. Folks don't know this. In that if you have a salon, or you have a state license, or you have a small business, the Secretary of State oversees that. And so, hey, take it away.
Before I answer that, which I do want to answer that, I did want to bring one more thing up on the January 6th thing.
Go for it.
So, it suddenly occurred to me recently because somebody said, oh yeah, something January 6th. And like in my head, I think insurrection. But then I made the connection. I said, oh, an insurrection occurred because they were trying to deny the peaceful transfer of power, which is really one of the instrumental things in our democracy, the importance of protecting a peaceful transfer of power that separates us from other countries who have gone through civil conflict and violence, really, because of that refusal for a peaceful transfer of power. And so I thought, man, like when you think about like the context of that refusal for the peaceful transfer of power, is that what's going to come in the future, right? And I think that it will again, especially for 2024. And the other thing that I do want to mention that I don't think a lot of people know about this is the day on January 6th where everybody was waving these flags. We saw the Trump flags, saw some white supremacy flags. There was a South Vietnamese flag flying. And there was an article that somebody wrote and they didn't know what flag that was. They thought it was like a hate group flag. And I was like, holy crap, that is a South Vietnamese flag. And I was horrified. I was really, really horrified. And I was also angry. And I decided when I got sworn in for my term in January that I would wear a traditional Vietnamese gown for my swearing in. And it's called an áo dài, which means long dress. And so I wore that. And I said, I'm wearing this because those people who are at the Capitol on January 6th, they do not get to speak for the Vietnamese community. And they do not get to use that flag to represent us as a community, especially when it comes to undermining our democracy and honestly being traitors to our country. And there's a lot of nuance as to why that ended up happening. And this is relevant also, I think, to the Secretary of State's office and to what we're facing. But part of that is disinformation. And as a Vietnamese person growing up in Georgia, I'm often tasked with outreach to the AAPI community as a whole for every every statewide campaign. And I am bilingual, so I can have those conversations. And the trends that we see are AAPIs as a whole are Democratic voters. Young AAPIs as a whole are increasingly Democratic. I mean, the numbers look amazing for young AAPI voters. When you segment older generation Asian American voters and you look at Vietnamese voters specifically, they are Republican voters. Mm-hmm. And so when we're phone banking, everybody goes through this trauma of like talking to our elders about why they should not be voting Republican. And it's really actually horrible. We're all like, we don't want to phone bank Vietnamese people anymore. Can we talk about this? And actually the vitriol that I have received as a sitting elected who has spoken up about a number of issues, the most vitriol I get are from Vietnamese men and white men. And we started as a community trying to figure out why this is going on. And it turns out that many years ago, a right-wing publication called the Epoch Times decided that they would sink money into translating news to Vietnamese people and Chinese people, right? And they did this, what they called an experiment. So they started translating all this right-wing news, targeting Chinese people and Vietnamese people. And it worked because older Vietnamese people who have limited English proficiency would only consume news in Vietnamese. And they're all through non-traditional media sources like YouTube, right?
Yeah.
And some other stuff. And there's no alternative. There's nobody on the other side investing in this. So everything they're reading in language is right-wing propaganda. And what makes it even harder for us as a community is these are our same folks who were subjected to propaganda during their time in Vietnam. And so they know exactly how to prey upon people's fears and their weaknesses, and it works. And so combating disinformation is actually something that the Secretary of State's office can do and should be doing for everybody, right? But I did want to share with y'all that January 6th experience.
That is a good point, because nobody studies you more than your enemy, and they know how to infiltrate into the community to put out that disinformation. And I think, as women, and I'm not originally from Georgia, but I live here now, and I understand there is a mindset that no matter what community you come from, for women, we are to be seen and not heard. And I think the only way that we can offset this disinformation and misinformation is by speaking out. So I think what's happening now is women are basically standing up and saying, the guys can't do it alone. They've been fighting a good fight for all of these years, but now we have to take our rightful place and actually speak truth to this terrible power. And that's exactly what it is. It is very powerful to be able to come into a community that you absolutely abhor and convince them of what you hate about them is actual fact. It's actual fact. So we have to really, I'm really excited about your candidacy, because I love it when women, I always say, I love it when a woman ain't afraid to do her thing. And for you to actually stand up and say, enough is enough. And then you're working with your counterparts and they're telling you, hey, by the way, I don't believe this, but I have to do this. What in your mind is going on about those people?
That's a perfect question. Yeah.
So, okay, y'all know in the legislature, we work across the aisle. We have conversations with people across the aisle. We have to. I mean, that's part of governance. And so I distinctly remember in November, right after the election, one of my Republican colleagues called me and he said, oh, hey, I just left a meeting, whatever, just calling you to say hi. And I said, hey, I have a question. I said, do you think the election was stolen? And he said, no, I do not think it was stolen. And then a few weeks later, his name ended up on the Texas lawsuit. And I was like, you literally just said that. But I had multiple conversations with people and they said, no, I don't think so. But my constituents are asking me to do something. And I said, you are doing a disservice to your constituents. The reason they believe that the election was stolen is because you all told them it was. It's like, you need to tell them the truth. But I do remember distinctly one day I'm talking to this senator, and he did not know or understand election laws at all. He said to me, "Hey, B, I have a question. I thought that absentee ballot voting and vote by mail were the same thing at one time, and now they're different." And I was like, "No, they are still the same thing, because at some point the national messaging, Republicans, you should vote by mail, but not absentee or something like that." They were trying to get their people to vote by mail, but wanted to discredit absentee ballot. I don't know. It was like some weird coordination. And I said, no, they are the same thing, and they have always been.
How do we know that? And wow.
And I thought, oh my gosh, the problem is so many of these sitting lawmakers themselves do not understand election.
Right. That's the scary part.
I know.
That is very.
So do they know that what they are oppressing, or are they just doing it because Trump?
Somebody told them to, right? So
that's some sad stuff.
Talking to this guy, I realize he's one of the elected officials who actually has no idea what's going on. So I was like, all right, I don't think I can have like a meaningful conversation about this. So I was like, I said, Senator, I have a question for you. I said, remember last year or earlier this year when, I don't know if y'all remember this, but on the Senate side, there was this clip that went viral, and it was of two blonde women with masks on counting ballots. And they tried to say that was Elena Parent and Jen Jordan counting ballots in Georgia, which is, you can't as an elected official counting ballots. But it was really two blonde women in Pennsylvania. Like, that was actually the real story. But they decided it was Jen Jordan and Elena Parent, and it like went viral. And I said to him, hey, Senator, I have a question. I said, why didn't you say anything? Why didn't y'all say anything when you saw that? I was like, you know that's not Jen and Elena. I was like, you know what they look like. You work with them. You know those women weren't them. I was like, it's not even like a political position about elections. I was like, those are your colleagues. I was like, and they're getting threatened because of this viral image of two women that you know are not them. And he just said, I felt really bad about it.
But and I know we maybe don't need to go here, but sometimes, and I'm going to make a huge assumption here, is that privilege shows up for certain populations, and it's that, oh, I'm not being threatened, so why would I care? Kind of a tone that I can pretty much.
Oh
yeah.
But I was like, dude, you did nothing about two people that you work with, that you see, that you know as human beings. You said nothing when you knew this was a straight out lie that was causing death threats towards them. And I feel like any opportunity that I have to, like, in a human way, just say, look, this is what you're actually doing. Why didn't you speak up on this? Or why didn't you do anything?
And it goes even deeper, Sabrina and B. When you said that, and you stated that, it makes me even more angry to think about how, when you talk about your colleagues, right? Mm-hmm. Come on, you know these folks. Think about what Kent did to Park. How disrespectful and nasty. Like, why are you treating your colleagues this nasty? We understand your privilege. We understand that you cheated, but you're just going to keep going with it like it's nothing wrong.
Right.
And I really think that also is like one of those things where you start to understand that the people in position of power, they know that they are selling their constituents a lie. And they are tapping into their constituents' worst qualities and worst fears. And they are doing it very purposefully, and they are coordinating. And so I always tell people, I was like, they are coordinating this. It is a sophisticated, coordinated effort that Republicans at the state level and all across our country at the federal level, they know they are lying. I was like, they have convinced their foot soldiers of something that is not true, and it is extremely nefarious, and they are doubling down. They're not changing their direction. And so we have to keep our guard up and be, we cannot let our guard down.
No, we can't.
We have to recognize the urgency of this moment, and that they are not going to stop until
they're just not going to stop, period.
It's dangerous, though. It's very dangerous. Very
Yeah.
dangerous.
And it is. And what I've learned about them, about the right wing extremists, is whatever word they're creating, whatever, like fake news, they were great at putting out. They were the masters of fake news. They started to implant the word actors. Oh, these were actors. They were, and they are great at acting. And I think one of the things that the only thing that can offset this is by putting people in place who truly have a desire to continue our democracy, because I am really fearful, to be honest, of what's going to happen in the next presidential election. It's going to be crazy. And I'm really concerned about whether or not we're going to be able to maintain a state level blue status. So if you are to be the next Secretary of State, what are some ideas that you have in regards to safe, keeping us safe with our vote, and just kind of like keeping the democracy and the electoral process safe, and as well as improving it?
Yeah, so I think that we have a lot of opportunity with the Secretary of State's office. And I like to think about it very realistically. And I want to be transparent about it, right? Like,
Right.
I want to see things like same-day voter registration, ending voter purging, the ability to vote at any precinct. There are laws that Democrats have introduced that we've been working on, but we can't get it passed under the. And so when we think about what's going to happen with redistricting, it's likely Republicans will remain control legislatively, right? And then also Senate Bill 202 is being litigated, different portions of it, but we can't rely on litigation as our sole strategy either, because we know the courts are not necessarily consistent with how they address voting rights. And so I think about it under those restrictions. What can we do with a Republican chamber and with the restrictions of 202? So I think that, I'll talk about four things. So one is the investment in our local election boards. So over the years, I've sat on governmental affairs. There have been local election boards who are afraid to come testify in committee because they're afraid that the SOS is going to be punitive in nature. We know it's hard to run local elections. So investing in our local election boards and having collaborative relationships where the Secretary of State is actively coming to the table and helping local election boards resolve any challenges they're facing. So there are two components of that. One is investing in training and increasing the training across the board. As somebody who has been on the ground as a poll monitor in multiple election cycles, you do definitely see if you have a good election worker, they know exactly what to do. And then if one is not as trained, they accidentally disenfranchise voters. So investing in that training. The other part of it is under Senate Bill 202, they have eliminated local election boards' ability to apply for private grant funding, which was used in local election boards across the state of Georgia, both Republican and Democrat, in 2020 and in 2021 for hazard pay, buying more equipment, for investing in voter education and outreach. They can't do that anymore, but the Secretary of State can do that. So being a leader in getting those funds and dispersing them equitably across our counties and our state to make sure that everyone's able to run their local elections. Now, the second thing is the voter purging situation, right? Mm-hmm. We're required by federal law to clean up the voter rolls, removing people who have died or people who have moved away. In Georgia, we have use it or lose it on top of that. That means removing people who have chosen to sit out on multiple election cycles, which in my opinion, if you are choosing to sit out to vote, that is your prerogative. You should not be removed from the voter roll.
Right.
You can't change any of that, right? But what the Secretary of State's office does is they send a postcard in the mail. And if you don't respond, then they're going to roll you off. We live in the 21st century. The Secretary of State's office has our phone number, our email addresses, our addresses. I don't know any candidate running for office who's going to send you one postcard in the mail. So
right.
the only like, please stop texting me. As Secretary of State, I would invest in a communication strategy using text, phone, email, mail, and working in good faith to keep eligible voters on the roll. I know that when I'm sleeping at night, I will hear my phone buzz sometimes, and it's an Amber Alert. We have the technology at hand, so let's not pretend that we're voter rolls, right? We have to, in good faith, keep people on the roll. So doing that. The third thing is language access. We are litigating a case currently in the 11th Circuit of Appeals, and it's a case that is against Gwinnett County and the Secretary of State for not providing in-language election materials for absentee ballot voting. And Gwinnett and the Secretary of State is arguing that they're still providing equal access because you can go to the polls if you don't have to vote by mail. And I'm listening to this court case one morning, and the judge goes, "Why can't you just put a button on the website that says Espanol?" And the reason is they don't want to. They simply do not want to. They don't have the political will to invest in translating or language access, or quite frankly, investing in anything that increases access to Georgia voters overall.
Right.
So as Secretary of State, and also as the daughter of somebody who lived in a household where English wasn't our primary language, we can invest in language translation, translating the portal to request your absentee ballot instructions in top spoken languages in Georgia, where we are a diverse state, and we will, again, be relying on a broad-based coalition to continue to win, but also taking that same investment and doing it in the corporations division, where we know there are immigrant-owned businesses, and that is an investment in workforce as well. And the last thing I want to talk about is I would create a division that solely focuses on disinformation, cybersecurity, and foreign interference. That would require hiring top-notch security, national security folks who understand the threat at hand, and then monitoring those threats, especially specifically focusing on these offshoot websites like 4chan and whatever else the right-wingers are on. And when a threat is identified, having a coordinated a plan to address that, working together with federal, state, and local law enforcement, but also working with our local election boards and equipping them with mitigating strategies. If a threat is identified around election disinformation, local election boards need to know that, and they need to be given the appropriate talking points to mitigate the disinformation. But here's what I think is really important. Election disinformation is about dividing Americans. It is about pitting us against each other. And at the core of it, it is about trust and mistrust. We have to be able to rebuild trust within the communities across the state of Georgia. And the Secretary of State's office needs to be a part of that. So what I would do is similar to what Colorado does. They send a representative from the Secretary of State's office, and they go out to the community. They talk to libraries, chambers, and community organizations, because y'all will have the relationships with people.
Right.
And then equip them with the talking points to mitigate the harm. Because at the core of this, it is about trust. And we have to have people elected in those positions who understand that and who are willing to build the trust. And it does have to happen in a very unsexy way. Like nobody's going to be like, "Oh, you're going to go to libraries and talk to people." Well, that's what we have to do, because it is, that is how we are reaching voters. It's the same as organizing. When I say, "Hey guys, we're going to go to my front porch and we're going to knock on our neighbor's door," not a lot of people want to do that, but it works because it's about building trust and building relationship and equipping people with the right information.
We got a comment here from a question from a viewer, from Rebecca. And Rebecca asks, is there a system in place that immediately takes people off of the voter rolls when a medical examiner or coroner files a death certificate?
Oh, that's a good question.
I don't know if it immediately takes place, Rebecca. I think there is a process by which they do, the systems do talk to each other on updates on when people have passed away, but I don't know that. I don't think it's an immediate one.
Yeah. Which goes back to what you were talking about earlier. That's very ironic that isn't automatic, right? So,
right.
But really quick, because we don't have much longer. But if you could talk a little bit about your platform and talk about the other aspects of the Secretary of State's office. And we know voting is such an important issue now because, and I want our viewers to understand this. If it wasn't if your vote didn't matter, then it wouldn't be such an issue. If that makes sense. So people wouldn't be trying to restrict your vote if it didn't matter. So, but I definitely want to hear your platform and let the viewers hear your platform and kind of some of the pieces that you think about when it comes to corporations, licensure, and all of that.
Yeah, so the Secretary of State's office is actually a really fascinating office because if you look at it, the Secretary of State's office handles corporations, charities, securities, licensure, and cemeteries and funerals, and elections. And I would say that all of those are actually very nonpartisan. It is about how we improve efficiency and process to improve the lives of Georgians all across our state, except for they made elections partisan. But all of the other divisions, there's tremendous opportunity. And I think about it in terms of economic opportunities, right? Yeah. And so we look at corporations. As a nonprofit business founder, when I went onto the Secretary of State's website to form my LLC, it was really confusing. And I think there's a lot of anxiety for people who are forming and taking these steps for the first time to create their businesses and their corporations for sole proprietors or for small business owners. There's not a lot of instruction around it. And people end up doing things like paying LegalZoom or paying somebody to be a registered agent when we already know that when you are taking these risks, the capital is very limited, right? And so I think a large part of it is investing in the education of how people do this. And we can do things where it's easily accessible on the website, but also the Secretary of State's office can do regional trainings and go through parts of the state and hold regional trainings and partner with our local chambers so that we are equipping small business owners with the right resources. And it's not just the creation, it's also the opportunities that come after. So we saw last year that there was just a huge inequity as it pertains to SBA and PPP related to the pandemic. One is a lack of access to information for small business owners and sole proprietors on how to get this capital. But two, there are natural barriers in place, and one of them is an accounting system. You actually have to have a certain threshold of accounting to even be able to apply for these loans in the first place. And that not only costs money, but it's really one of those anxiety-ridden things too. So as Secretary of State, I would partner with financial experts to teach these classes to small business owners. It's an investment in our workforce, and it removes a barrier that would then open opportunities for small businesses and small corporations. And then, we think about the licensure division in the same way, right? This is an area which would be able to provide economic opportunity. When I was in Savannah, I went to a barbershop, and the barber said to me, I had to relearn how to run my business during a pandemic, and I had to do it by myself. He said there was nobody who even simply said, here are the safety regulations you have to follow under a pandemic to operate. And I was worried that my business would get shut down and I would not be safe for myself and my customers. All it would require, he said, was, what if somebody made a video with instructions on how to safely operate your barbershop during a pandemic?
Ding, 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 ding.
Yeah. And then he also said, as I was thinking through how to adapt my business during a pandemic, I wanted to create a mobile barbershop. And then it come to find out you cannot actually have one. It's restricted. And we were kind of in jest laughing and saying, yeah, but you can have a mobile grooming thing for your pet. So Dr. Bryant, if your doggy needs a haircut, you can have mobile grooming. If you need one, you cannot have mobile grooming. So it's about looking at the barriers in place and figuring out how we can remove them without compromising public safety, because we don't want to compromise the public safety. And part of that is listening, right? It is meeting with practitioners who are on the ground and learning from them. What do you need and how can we better improve this? And the last thing I want to talk about is a consumer protection angle. There's a tremendous opportunity both from the charities and securities division to do some consumer protection. So an example is we know that there are fraudulent charities out there, and that information should be made known. I mean, it is already public information, but the Secretary of State office can have a role in ensuring that people know where to put their money. And especially when we think about elderly people, right? Investing money in charity. Right. We need to protect our seniors. And the same for securities, although I will say that there's a simple solution to that. There's an actual public list of fraudulent securities. All the Secretary of State would have to do would connect that list to the actual division so people could see it. And then on the consumer protection angle, like these are more of like very unsexy issues, but are important, right? Like when you think about losing a loved one, and you're trying to plan a funeral, most funeral homes don't have a public listing of prices on their website.
Right.
And so like when you're in distress and you're calling, and funerals are very costly, we got to think about ways in which we move the industry and the practitioners to be willing to post the prices on websites, and so that it can be consumer protection, transparency, and help mitigate some of the stress that families go through during a time like that. And then another angle of consumer protection is, I don't know I think this happens all the time, but I get these text messages from these random people that are like, hey, I want to buy your house. And, they target seniors and they target legacy residents, and they constantly text and they email and they call, all of these different things. And they always offer a much lower market rate, and they capitalize on people who need the cash, right? And oftentimes they operate under a shell corporation. And there are a lot of businesses in Georgia that operate under shell corporations, and we have to regulate that so that we know exactly who it is behind these businesses that are taking advantage of consumers. So I think about it in terms of the SOS's office, democracy reform and protection, economic opportunities, and consumer protection.
Definitely. Because in rural areas, there are a lot of business owners. Like lately, I register a lot of businesses for free, because of the fact that, a lot of people don't know how to get online and work their business. They don't know, and they're paying people this a huge amount of money to register their business. And some folks, when they get on there, they're like, okay, I paid extra, or they sent me something back and said I have to pay more. They don't know what they've done. And within the last 4 years, there's been a lot of confusion in regards to how to register your business and what you're registering for and what you're actually purchasing. So yeah, there are a lot of kinks that definitely need to be worked out when it comes down to the business registry part. And I'm glad that that's an agenda item for you, because I do believe that it's going to be much appreciated, at least for my folks out here in the coastal area.
Oh yeah, definitely. I totally agree on that. Well, B, how can people go on the website, social media, and how do they contribute?
So my website is www.beeforgeorgia. Everything is spelled out, BEEFOR, georgiaspelledout.com. And then my Twitter handle is the same, B4Georgia. It's all spelled out. Instagram the same, and Facebook all the same. My favorite social media platform is Twitter, and I'm told I need to get a TikTok. So if anyone's really good at TikTok,
I do know someone that's really good at TikTok, and she will have you on 10.
Listen, let me tell you something. I get off when I have free time in the afternoon. I spend about an hour on TikTok. It is so addictive. I mean, it's hilarious.
I am not looking forward to another social media platform.
Yeah, I'm telling you, don't add it to your phone right now. Right? Maybe after the election. Yeah. Maybe after the election.
You got to use it to reach young voters, right? It's like
yeah. Well, let them do that part. So, Sabrina, any last question from you before we shift on up?
One last question. What would you say to young women who are watching you and they want to get in politics? What would you say to them?
Wonderful question. Love it.
Well, I'll tell you about a story. So when I was thinking about running for Secretary of State, I called Stacey Abrams, because everyone should call Stacey Abrams. And I said, Stacey,
I agree.
I said, hey, Stacey, I'm really, struggling around this anxiety of having an Asian woman run statewide in Georgia. It's just not a thing, right? And she said, well, she gave me two answers. One was her very practical answer. She said, B, how long have you been Asian in Georgia? Well, all my life, Stacey. But she did say to me, look, when I was running for office in 2018, people said the same thing. Can a Black woman be governor in Georgia? And I showed them, yes. And she said, sometimes you just have to show people in order for people to believe it. So for young women thinking of running for office, we just have to show people. We are the ones who create that vision for other people. And
that is excellent.
We need more women running for office.
Yeah.
So just do it, girls. Just do it.
Girl.
Well, B, we wish you the best. If you would like to appear on some of the other ATR shows, they have a different audience, different spin. Some a little more fun, some a little more serious, but it gets you to a different audience. And so if you're ever here in Savannah, look us up. What would we go eat?
I'm going to be in Savannah in December, so I'll call y'all before I come.
Yeah. Sabrina, where are we going to eat?
Anywhere. Savannah has delicious food. So
yeah, Savannah has excellent food. I love Savannah food for sure.
Yes.
My favorite now is Plant Riverside, so I'm there all the time.
All right. I'm down.
Well, all right. Well, look us up. If you don't have my info, Daniel knows where to find me. And you got my email. And
thank you, y'all.
Well, thank you, B. Sabrina, I'm going to hold on to you for a minute. I know Julius would get me if we didn't talk about the next part. But thanks so much, B, and we wish you the best.
Thank you, y'all. It was really fun.
Enjoy your weekend.
You too. Bye, y'all.
Bye-bye. So, are you aware that we have an East Plus coming up?
Yes, I am aware.
So, one of the things I know Julius wanted us to cover, and I totally agree with it, is that for those who are watching, definitely share. We have an East Plus, which is an educational special penny local sales tax. What that means, because I'm not playing a commercial, is that we add a penny to the sales tax that will go towards educational resources, facilities, learning modules, whatever that looks like. It helps our children, our students learn. It helps for student success. And so let's all chip in for the benefit of our public schools. I'm a product of Savannah Chatham County Public School System. And with that said, you ought to be proud that that penny is going to create more people like myself and more people like Jamal Turay and more people like the Julius Halls of this world, more people like you. So let's give back to the children what has been given to us. And so vote yes for the East Block. So what's your thoughts, Sabrina?
I totally agree. We can never not invest in our children, and because they are the future, however cliche that may sound, is the absolute truth. And we just have to keep moving the needle forward to give them the opportunities that they truly deserve. What we do now plants the seed for tomorrow, and we want to bloom beautiful fruit. Edible fruit that people want to actually take home, take into their businesses, whatever you may want to do. But we definitely got to get involved.
And I can tell you said investment. We'll either invest in the children now on the front end, or we're going to invest on the back end. And we don't want to know what that back end is. We all get it. The other part of Sabrina I was thinking about, and I don't know if this is a local, state, federal issue, we should consider a sales tax for nonprofits. We have so many great nonprofits. I'm working with a client now here in Savannah, Georgia, who wants to start a homeless shelter. And it's just so much red tape. And the idea that this individual has is wonderful. And I'll probably email it to you, and maybe you can help me farm it out. But the red tape, so I don't know, to the local leaders watching, to whoever's watching, why don't we consider a sales tax or something to where we are contributing or creating a pot of funds for nonprofits in our area that are going to benefit our community. And why is it important to address homelessness? Because it is an economical piece, right? Yes. We need to put more little houses like we do for the veterans out there. And better yet, it's just humane, right?
Right.
We have children who can't afford to put on clothes to go to school or who can't afford to eat. How great would it be to see a nonprofit start to address those areas? And so we've got to start investing in the community in a different way of thinking. And so I just challenge our elected leaders to kind of consider that as an option, or when we get these big funds of money from the federal government, start giving them to people who are already doing well. Give them to
Right.
nonprofits who are going to impact those who are most vulnerable. I think
Right.
that's important.
I
Yeah.
totally agree. I totally agree. But you know what, Robert? One of the things that we have to do is in order to bring, because we're birthing new ideas. What you're saying is unheard of. And
Hmm.
that's the genius of it all, because we're birthing what could be tomorrow, for tomorrow. And I think in order for actually to make these things actually manifest, we have to really get people to see some of these candidates and actually choose who would support that vision and get them to vote for those candidates. That's
Yeah.
basically what we have to do, because you're absolutely right. It's a shame we are the most powerful country in the entire world, and we have homelessness.
Yeah. And I'm gonna take it a step further. I say this often, and it comes from Warnock. He shared with us when he ran. We are we warehouse more individuals. We incarcerate more individuals than any other country. That's crazy to me. We've got to start being more compassionate and understand what the judicial system was for. It wasn't for capitalism, which it is about now. It's not about
Right,
rehabilitation. It's about how much probation is about what money you can get out of a person. And if a person's already struggling and got to feed their mom, their children, their family, you
hmm,
now going to put another tax on them to put them further behind in a starting line that they already started behind their other peers in
right,
the first place. That's stupid.
right,
We got to change the criminal
right,
justice system to be a system of compassion and rehabilitation. Now, what am I saying? Stop incarcerating folk for nonviolent crimes. Period. If
right,
somebody want to go over there and drink and live out, or do whatever they got to do, use substance to kill themselves, that's on them. But why are
right,
we putting people behind bars who do not commit violent crimes, and now the taxpayers paying for them? Oh, but yet you want to call them a felon so they get out, and now they're a burden
right.
on the economic system. That's stupid.
Right, right. And I think, it's all by design. But what we could do is basically, again, a lot of folks, we don't succeed because we fail, simply because of misinformation, or we just don't want the information. I've
Hmm.
heard people say, don't talk to me about that. I don't want to hear about that. Well, they should, we have laws that are on the books from hundreds of years ago. They still, and I'm being, not literal,
No, but
but
yeah,
we have,
yeah.
yeah, we have antiquated laws that they're still using today. And no one is going back and revisiting these
Mhm.
ordinances, these laws, to say, okay, I think that's outdated, we need to pull that off the book. And then people are still being incarcerated because of them. One of the things that we're all looking at is how the marijuana law is going to transition.
That's the dumbest law ever created.
Yeah, how is that law going to transition? And then if it is legalized, are those people who are currently incarcerated going to be given a lesser sentence or released? And if they are released, are they going to be made to serve probationary time,
Yeah.
or listed? How are they going to be listed in the court of public opinion when it comes down to jobs and different things like that?
Well,
So we really have a lot of work to do.
and the one thing I want people to do, I tell people this all the time: stop listening to everything you hear. Just stop it. At the end of the day, and I told people this all the time: marijuana is not a drug. To say that marijuana is a drug is to say a green bell pepper is a drug. And let me tell you why.
Yeah.
When you understand the history of why marijuana is illegal in the first place, I'm gonna break it down because I always say that
Yeah.
marijuana was made illegal back centuries ago when it was in competition with cotton. You know why? Because hemp has many properties. One of them being that it can be made out of clothing, made into
Yeah.
clothing,
Hmm.
right? So if I'm a white male with a farm and I got these black folk, these slaves out here picking my cotton, you ain't gonna have no product that's gonna come in competition with my cotton. So
Hmm.
what better way than to make it look bad is, oh, now it's a Schedule One whatever drug.
Right, right,
Oh,
right,
but wait. Who? I found a great way to put more black folks in jail so they become free slave labor, as Rebecca just talked
right,
about.
right, right,
So, but
right.
guess what though? Hmm. Let's fast forward to 2021. I now found some properties where it can be used in medical purposes, or maybe it can reduce anxiety. Also, now we're going to make it legal, folks. You got to start waking up. I've said this for 20 years. Marijuana is not a drug. It's not a drug. How many times have y'all ever seen somebody overdose marijuana? How many times have you seen somebody have a drink, 3 drinks, and get a DUI? Yes, they will. How many times have you seen them smoke blunt and get a DUI? So come on, people, stop believing everything what you hear.
Right. The time for disinformation is over. We really, truly have to inform our communities, and you guys, I think they have to be receptive of it. You know, we have such, factions within our communities. You know, you have the younger, you have the older, you have the spiritual, and then you have the non-spiritual, you have the men, you have the women, and everybody has their own ideology and their own approach to certain topics. But we have to be willing to come together as a community to actually sit down to see, especially as the Black community or a community of color, to see what impacts us the most and how we can come to a resolution so we can move our community forward. And one of them is by basically reevaluating the marijuana laws.
Yeah, and you're right. So we're going to keep the conversation going. Don't be surprised if you are permanent on this show. But I got one thing for my little brother in Indiana who's a Gator fan. Tevin Byers, this is for you. Go Dawgs. With that, we'll see y'all next Saturday. I've been picking at him all week. He had a little low moment. I uplifted my little brother. But go Dawgs, go Dawgs. The Gators will lose and Dan Mullen will be fired. Hey, I said it here first. Bernard Brown, touchdown. What's your closing thoughts, Sabrina? We're going to be out of here.
You know what? I just really had a good time today. Thank you so much. You were so pleasant to work with. And our first time actually interacting, and we flowed.
Yeah. I told you. Hey. You done messed up your status. Fooling around Julius Hall. And that's a shout out to Julius. Man, this man has built this thing up for the people of Savannah and the state of Georgia. So folks who this is a shout out to the people who got to say so much about him. Get a chance to sit down and have coffee with the man and learn about him. People make mistakes in life, but people also can be redeemed. Stop judging and start learning about people.
And this is a beautiful a platform for folks to actually learn. So congratulations, Julius. And congratulations, Robert, because you came on board and you've been helping him hold this down. And you guys are the official watchdogs. So
we got Bernard Brown, Jay Jones. We just believe in him and even all of us. And we're not gonna keep going. So you keep on with me.
Yeah, I'll keep on.
But at the end of the day, folks, stop judging folks and get to know a person's heart. God don't judge you for your actions. God judge you for your heart. When people understand that, you stop judging that man so much. With that, we're gonna get out here. See y'all next Saturday at noon, and we bringing Sabrina back. All right, let me find my thing. Bernard, stop bothering me, Bernard. In America, all right. With that, we're gonna get out of here if I can figure out how to get out of here. Oh, here we go.